All right, welcome everybody. Today we got guest and friend of mine, neighbor, Adrian ILIESIU. So Adrian, I'm really excited to have you, Adrian, because I think you're really somebody, we can all identify with. But let me a little background on you. Adrian ILIESIU is software engineering technical leader for Cisco DevNet, and he'll explain a little bit about what that is, and speaker for global developer conferences. So Cisco DevNet, and he'll talk more about this, developer program to help developers and IT professionals who want to write applications and develop integrations with Cisco products, platforms, and APIs. One of the reasons I'm really excited to have Adrian here is, and he'll tell more about his educational background, but besides university background, he is got his education, networking education, partly from the Cisco Networking Academy, which is what we use both at UCSC and at Cabrillo College for a lot of the content, at least that I use. He has more than 20 years of experience in network and systems engineering, specializing in systems integration and design, Cisco, Juniper, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Dell, etc. Wide range of products: routing, switching, firewalls, wireless security, load balancing, site-to-site VPNs. Adrian has built IT infrastructure solutions from scratch, maintained and supported already installed systems, involved in upgrades, mitigations, migrations, probably mitigations too, consolidations, audits, and general IT. So I think this is great because I know Adrian is somebody that I think we can all relate to, both beginning our career and, he was where you were not so long ago. Me, it was much longer ago. So Adrian, welcome, my friend.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Rick. Hello, everyone. Super happy to be here and looking forward to discussing about, NetAcad, my background, and hopefully somebody will get inspired. And if I help at least one of you out of the group watching this, I'm going to be happy. So glad to be here.
I appreciate it. You're helping me. So already,
all right, there we go. So mission accomplished.
No, I'm sure students are very excited about this. I've been hearing a lot about it already. So maybe start just telling us a little bit about yourself, your educational background, how you got interested in this, and all that good stuff.
Yeah. So where do we start? It's a really long story. The older I get, the more the story grows. So there's more and more adventures and things to go through. But yeah, I was originally born in Romania, raised over there, and did my university, college over there, right? So I ended up doing what they call electronics and telecommunications. I'm the 2000. So, that generation, I started college at the 2000 mark, did the college, and then had a major in telecommunications. So there's a lot of data transmissions, a lot of some networking, but not too much. Just like, hey, this is how networks work, digital telecommunications. Lots of back then was this phone, was like telephony, right? Those Siemens, whatever, phone exchanges and whatnot. So it's
those PBX machines and things.
PBX is before. Thank you, Rick. Before VoIP killed them. So, like we were talking, right? Doing all this college, a lot of dry theory. Right, and back then they were starting a NetAcad at that college that I was going to. So they were fairly fresh with NetAcad. NetAcad overall was pretty fresh back then. We only had like CCNA, CCNP, routing and switch. It was, I remember, for CCNA, it was like, routing, switching. It was like some troubleshooting they had back then. So it was pretty. It was covering a lot of material. So 2003, I started NetAcad mostly to see, what it's all about. Because like, hey, it's networking. I like that course in networking that I had in the college. So the teacher teaching the class actually also was teaching NetAcad. So it was after hours, weekends, right? So you would go, they would have a lab, and you were able to interact with, their lab gear over there, old school Cisco routers and switches. So, I mean, fell in love with the thing, right? That's where then I saw how things work, where what I call rubber meets the road, right? So you have all this theory, but that's where you actually go and you apply it, and you configure these things, you configure your VLANs, you configure your spanning tree, you make sure that it's, back then it was a big thing. And then your routing protocols, and you advertise the routes, and you see traffic going through, and you get that ping successful from one end to the other, and you track where traffic is going through. So I was hooked, right? At that point, it's like, yeah, this is super cool. And I really like the fact that it's instantaneous also, right? That was like a bit scary, but also like you configure something and it was like, boom, works or it doesn't, right? So that was something that to me was like fascinating. Like, oh, wow, you can, configure something here, or you're connected to a remote device. It could be at, the other side of the world, and configure something and affect instantaneously what happens on the network, at that point. So that was like, to me, it was like, wow, so cool to be able to, just like interact with this gear and do instantaneous changes. So that,
Yeah, that's kind of cool to do something a network where you're doing something at one end and something happens somewhere else physically.
yeah, right. So it's like you see that effect throughout your whole network. I mean, that could be good, but also bad if you mess up, right?
Yeah.
In the lab, you learn, of course, you break things and you learn how they work. And so it
So you saw a
was,
real difference between kind of the theory, I mean, both useful, I take it, both the theory side of things at
oh yeah,
your
oh yeah,
traditional college, and then what the Networking Academy Cisco courses were providing as well.
definitely. Because I mean, at school, I was learning back then, Manchester coding and whatnot, and voltage levels for transmission of data, right? So it's like how data is encoded and transmitted over the wire. And then you go with NetAcad and you actually connect the cable, right? And you see how it's the crossover cable and straight through cable and how it works and how voltage gets transmitted and how everything comes together, right? So that was really eye-opening to me, because like voltage on a wire, it's cool. But then you go and you see it, and it's like, it really resonated with me and it really made an impression, because like, hey, this is, like I said, where things happen. So it brought that practical aspect into my study. So that's what I really loved about it. And I mean, I learned, and then kind of I got hooked on it.
So that's really where you got your kind of the passion when you actually started actually getting kind of the
Yeah.
hands-on and
Yes, definitely. So then, I knew that this is what I want to do, right? As a career. It's like, yeah, if it's possible to do this. And back then, I mean, and even now, there's jobs and, certification was required. And it's like, okay, so they had a system in place also where it's like, right, we get you associate level, you get started, you learn, and then as you keep learning more and you get more advanced, then we go to a professional level, it's going to be, a bit more advanced. And you go for the CCIE, which was, back then, even now to some extent, but back then CCIE was really, really a big thing. Like those were, like the PhDs in networking at that point, right? And I ended up going to that exam too, eventually 11 years later. But it took me a while to get to that level, right, of expertise. But I mean, it was so nice because everything was nicely organized, right? So the content is there. Hey, you studied this, you know this, right? So for CCNA, you study your switching, you study your routing, and then and you apply it. And then as you go professional, you start adding VPNs and you start adding, security and a bit of voice. And so you keep adding all these technologies on top of each other. And then you start seeing, layer 2, layer 3, 4, how they interact, protocols, and how you troubleshoot them, and how data gets transmitted, and you get DNS, and you get load balancing, and right, so you get to discover more and more. So it's like, if you're have an inquisitive mind and you want to know how things work, I mean, this is the industry for you, right? Because I mean, there's so many things, there's so many new technologies coming up on a daily basis. I'm messing up with Apache Kafka right now, which is blew my mind. Also, is a product technology that is just right something super cool that I'm interested in right now.
So can I
So
ask you,
yeah,
how did you, so you talked about going from CCNA, which is Cisco Certified Network Associate. Now we also have another layer before that you can do CCST, but CCNP, Network Professional, then IE is Internet Network Expert. Was that something you were doing after you graduated and started working? Were you, and then can you tell us a little bit about your job?
Yeah.
Like a network engineer, what kind of things did you do? So if you could kind of couple of questions.
Yeah. So that's a good one. So that brings, so started CCNA, right? 2003. I was third year of college back then, and back in Romania, it was like a 5-year thing it would take you to do. So it was like year third, fourth, and fifth, right? I was doing NetAcad, and it was hardcore. Like I was reading through those courses, right? I was memorizing pretty much by heart everything. I kind of overdid it because you never know what you're gonna get on the exam, right? So it's like, am I ready for this? I don't know. I kept going over the courses and it's like learning, labbing everything. So then, luckily, there's this organization in Europe called ISEC. I don't even know if they have it. I think they still have it these days, but it's a student organization that organizes internships for students. It's mostly for economic students, but they have a branch, or at least they had back then a branch for like techie schools and tech colleges. So ended up that I joined this student organization, and they had an internship in. So this was back in Romania, right? So they had an internship in Bulgaria, which is also an Eastern European country over there, just southern of Romania. So they had. It's like, hey, there's an internship for 4 months here. I was graduating 2005, pretty much July. And August is like, hey, you want to go and spend 4 months, all expenses paid. They will pay lodging, and you'll get a salary. And it's 4 months, it requires, Cisco skills. It was a Cisco Platinum partner in Bulgaria. So they were looking for, students, fresh graduates that are interested in Cisco, that have a bit of background. So like, sure, I'll do it. Why not? Right. Start August, go there 4 months, just explore a new place, a whole new country.
So what kind of things did you do? Like at the job?
Yes, so over there at the job, right? So the thing is, they were deploying Cisco routers and switches to all the schools in Bulgaria, right? So it was a huge project. This company, the Cisco partner, had won this project, right, of digitizing pretty much all the schools in Bulgaria. So that was, thousands of sites, right? So they had tens of thousands of devices. So what I did, right, as interns, they would get you these small routers, that they were installing, depending on the site and the school, how big it was, you'd get different type of router. But you would have to, get the config from this place and manually put it on your router, right? So they had a web interface. You would go, it's like, oh, this router goes to this school. All right, the config, I can download as text file. Here, just click download, you download the config of that device, and then you copy paste that onto the router. Make sure that you reboot the router, right? And make sure that you check after you apply the config, comes back online, and then box it back up, and put it on the side. It's gonna get shipped. That's cool. So it was right. So like very manual. Like they needed somebody right to copy
Well, it's a
paste
great,
that.
that's kind of thing, just getting your foot in the door and
Right,
getting experience doing anything.
right.
So,
And then I got pulled into, right. So they were going because they had these like central locations. They'll call it like a metropolitan area network. So they had like central locations where they have a small data center. So they would rack and stack switches and routers in there because traffic was kind of aggregated from a certain area, was aggregated into that central location, right? So we would do installation of racks, right? So then I heard about, generators, inverters, power inverters, PBX, right? It's like, oh, here's the PBX. They were kind of close by. So as I was learning, right, all these emails, old school PBX, I was actually seeing them. I was like, oh, it's right here. This is how it works.
by the way,
So,
rack and say what rack and stack is for those that may.
right. So it's basically you take devices out of the box and you put them in a rack. I don't know if you folks have seen this, but these devices go in racks of data. So it's basically a metal frame, right? It's usually 19-inch wide, and then right, it's purposely built for these devices. And as you see, they're all kind of built the same width. Length depends because it depends on how deep the rack is, but it's just a place of installing these devices and keeping them cool and keeping them secure. And, it's usually behind closed doors in a cooled area. And
Would you say, by the way, that that's about being able to physically access, plug things in, I mean, virtual is great, but having that experience of plugging things in.
I still think that it's very useful, right? Even now in cloud world, and like you said, everything being virtual, and that's why it was a bit when you said about routers and switches that you still have them. It's like, oh, it's I thought people would have moved to all virtual, but I'm glad that people still get a chance to see these devices in their hardware form, how it was. I still think it's useful. For me, it was back then. The world has evolved, of course, since back then quite a bit. But I still think it's useful to see these devices and see how they work and touch them and interact with them and see the LEDs blinking. It's like, oh, is the port on? Oh, it's blinking. Oh, it has blinked twice. Oh, so it's just, I have layer 2. So it's interesting to know and just to see. For me, it's still fascinating.
I think it's important. I think for those of us that work in the virtual world a lot, we're comfortable with that because we've worked in the physical world. We know
what's behind the virtual.
But if you've never done the physical, it's really hard to make that transformation from physical to the virtual. Like, okay, I've done this, but I really have no idea what this looks like, or where these links are going. Or to me, it just, and there's nothing that hearing that click at first time where you plug in an Ethernet cable into a switch port and hearing that click, it just warms my heart.
Yeah. I still think it's critically important to go through those stages, right, and learn and see, because all cloud, all virtual infrastructure at the end of the day in the background is running on, these are the devices that are forwarding traffic between, and these are the devices that run all the networks and the whole internet at the end of the day.
So I mean, say a little bit about that, if you would. People always say, well, everything's cloud, everything, and well, what is the cloud? Wouldn't you agree that it's
somebody else's computer, right? It's somebody else's network that you're renting.
All the devices and all the protocols, and whether you're working for a cloud provider or using a cloud provider, it's still all the same protocols and everything you're using.
Yep, exactly. And I mean, this cloud companies have done a fantastic job of abstracting what's actually happening, right? In the background, they give you a cleaned up version of the network. You have, it's like, oh, it's easy. You just configure an IP address on this interface and it's magic. It works. right? I have access to the network, just, put an IP of a virtual interface, and well, in the background, right, it's gonna be a VLAN or a VLAN in VLAN encapsulated, or depends how they're doing. So that's why if you know, then you can go and kind of troubleshoot. They don't really give you access though to troubleshoot deep, right? That's another thing, because they want to keep you at a level where it's all abstracted for you. It's easy, it's click and go. But deep down, it's gonna be OSPF and BGP, and it's gonna be VLANs, and it's gonna be VXLAN, and right, all these technologies that you learn. That's what runs all the clouds. Mind you, they're not gonna give you access to most of that. But if you end up working for one of these cloud providers, then you would have to know, right? And networking, to a certain extent, right? Because now with the cloud, you're not really configuring routers and switches necessarily as much. It's always, it's mostly servers. You deploy your server, you build your application, and the network is kind of automatically done for you. But as you start growing and you have hybrid environments and you have on-prem, and most companies have some type of, on-prem, cloud, hybrid type of setup. And we've seen now, actually, we're seeing with AI specifically kind of a pushback and people moving back to on-prem because it's so expensive to do AI in the cloud, right? That they're getting to a point where it's just cheaper and in a way better to just kind of bring back the AI workloads on-prem. It's going to be interesting to see, right, next 5-10 years what's going to happen, because it was like a big push towards cloud, right? And now we're seeing with AI, it's like, oh, maybe we're going to come back a bit on-prem for that. So it's going to be interesting. I'm
And I think
curious and excited.
I think it's also important to, and on-prem means on premises, by the way. So, not to forget that, stuff in the cloud, you may work for a cloud provider, but also, cloud is not cheap. You're paying for that.
Yeah.
But even if you're using the cloud or a hybrid where you have some things in the cloud, some things in your own data center, you still have an enterprise network that you got to deal with. That's not going away. There's not a black box, right, that you connect to. You still have your network.
Yeah, so it's still a network even in the cloud, right? You still have to build it, you still have to address it, you still have to make sure it works, you still have the firewall, security groups and whatnot, right? So you have to make sure that it works. You have to know how
Also in
firewalls work.
your own enterprise network as well.
Yeah, and BGP, how it works as you start having BGP connections with ISPs, and right, because enterprises usually, and that depends on how big they are, but network can get extremely complicated, right? I'm telling you, because we've learned over the past like 40 years to 40, 50 years, right? Networks can get extremely complicated. And as you start building them and they get larger and larger, and you need high availability and you need all these features, right? You want them to work 24/7, no glitches, no downtime. With all these protocols, all these technologies, it gets complicated. It gets very complicated.
Getting
Right.
all these things to work together.
Yes. I mean, I
All
don't
the
want to
different
scare
components.
anyone. I don't want to scare anyone,
No, that's
right?
the
But
fun stuff.
that's the fun though, right? Because exactly, look at it as a challenge, and it's good once you get um, that feeling of you've accomplished something, right? When you get all these things working, it really is something. If you're passionate about it, that's what drives you forward. That's what gives the hunger for more. I want to learn more. I want to know more. So
After all
yeah,
these years, I still get excited about building a network and the ping works. I
yeah,
just like, wow, okay, in spite of me, it's still working. And and that's one of the things I try and really talk to students about is all these protocols, how they're all have their separate roles and responsibilities, but as a network engineer, you've got to get all these things to work together. And although there's, AI is going to play a more important role in assisting what we do, you're the one that's responsible for the network working, not an outsourced AI per se, like outsourcing it to somebody. If you rely on a third party or AI to do something for you and you don't understand it, you're still going to be held accountable.
Yeah, you're gonna be in trouble because I mean, I just had a session yesterday with John Capobianco on my live stream, and he's a big AI guy, right? He's big physically, but he also like he's big into AI. And we were talking, right, and kind of show me a bit of LangChain, and we've had a different session before with, automation and in the AI world. So you still need somebody, right? I mean, I don't know if you folks have started using like ChatGPT and other LLMs, but
they're students.
it gives you so yeah, so for sure you want to use, but especially when you start, I'm talking infrastructure, and you start doing a bit more complicated things, right? If you don't know what the LLM gives you, you could run into trouble because it gives you, and if you don't understand the features that you enable, or you don't understand the protocols and how they work, they'll spit out a config for you, and it's like, yeah, I want an OSPF config on this device with these 3 routes. They'll give you that, but you have to be careful because it might not be secure. It might be a username and password. It might not be exactly what you need. It might be a process that's overlapping with a different OSPF process that you already have running. So you just have to be mindful. And if you don't know, right, like I said, and just copy paste stuff or what LLMs give you, it's going to cause issues and trouble for you.
Yeah, when it breaks, you can't blame AI. Say, well, not my fault. There's, So, can you talk a little bit about, certifications? I know,
Yeah.
Starting with, a lot of these students are really starting just with their CCST, maybe CCNA, I hope, maybe even further, and any other certs. And how do you balance that with education or degrees versus certification? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, I think both typical education and certifications have their role, right, in your development, in your career development, right? Because, I mean, college, for me at least, was, yes, I have to do it. It was like a no-brainer. You have to get that fundamental knowledge, right? Like I said, data transmissions. You learn about Shannon's laws and how data gets digitized and transmitted, and you learn about 4G and 5G and how they work and all the data encodings. So that's get you your fundamental knowledge of how everything works, right? You have to have that college education in my mind from an engineering perspective. And once you have that, certifications and this industry and all these vendors that are coming with, they're just implementing what you've learned, right? They're having products, sorry about that. They're having products and they're selling solutions with pretty much what you've learned. So it's like where theory meets reality, right? So that's where vendors start building all these devices and they start selling them, and then customers build enterprises and we build networks at home and all of that. But the certifications for me was very interesting because they, like I said, they already have everything preset for you, right? So you don't need to kind of go and figure out, it's like, okay, what do I need to learn, right? Because it could be daunting when you start on your journey. It's like, okay, where do I start, right? It's like there's so much stuff, like I was saying, there's so many technologies. Where do you start? Right, so they kind of already build that for you with the certifications. It's like, oh, CCST, if you don't have any knowledge at all with how these things work, right? You don't have an engineering background or any knowledge at all. Could be somebody that has not touched the computer before, right? So it's like, okay, let's get these people and just, get them trained and show them how it works. And then as you go forward and you learn more, it's all there, right? I mean, one of the teachers back then in college, when he was calling Medicare like McDonald's, like a, you know, because it's everything ready for you. It's like a fast food, right? So you go, you have your meal, but it's, you know, it's everything ready for you, prepackaged, right? The knowledge is there. Just, you know, I'm not saying that it's McDonald's, just, you know, an
Yeah.
analogy to that, but it's all ready there for you, right? It's prepared, it's being kept up to date, like I was saying. So it's, you know, as the industry evolves and this technology evolve, they'll have a new version. So that's the other thing. You have to be mindful that you have to keep up to date, right, with all these technologies, and you have to constantly learn. So if and the only thing that you can do that if you're passionate about it, right? So if you like it, if you don't think of it as a job. So if you go, and I mean, honestly, even now after this many years, right, I'm still excited and I still learn every day something, or I try to learn something new every day. So that's kind of, you know, something that you have to keep in mind. If you're passionate about it, um, and you search, knowledge is there, right? The knowledge is there. And the easiest way to get the knowledge is through certifications. Are they enough? No. You're gonna need to practice hands-on, right? But it's a very good start. It's a very good starting point. Um,
Can
and
we
then
talk
certificate.
about that, about the starting point?
Yes.
You know, first, you know, it's, I think for me, by the way, it was easier for me to get passionate about this when I was working. As a
Yeah.
student, it's hard because you've got, you know, all these classes and you're really more about passing exams and getting through classes. But when I started working, that's when I developed the passion, and they pay you. That's the nice thing too.
And they pay you pretty well, by the way, right? I mean,
Well, you know, for some of us, depends what industry you go in. You know, no, I'm kidding. But you know, these are students, community college, university.
yeah.
How do you get that first interview, that first job? Where do you start trying to get doors open?
Yeah, yeah. I
No, it's a
mean,
hard question, by the way.
no,
It's not,
no. I mean, network with people, right? Look for internship, look for student organizations. Like I said, at least that's what worked for me. So student organization back then, right? Get together with other students. They have the system in place. Get an internship, right? Do internships as you, if you can, in summers. Go do like a 2, 3, 4 month internship. Um, and meet people, right? LinkedIn, all this social media, right? Make sure you connect with people. Hey, I'm interested to work. People are actually watching that, right? I'm interested to have an internship. Um, join NetAcad, right? Join NetAcad. NetAcad will give you a bit of background and you can put it on your CV, on your resume, right? It's like, oh yeah, I did CCNA, and then people will notice that.
so
Right? When they
Netacad,
look,
by the way, is Cisco Networking Academy, right? So it's the site that we go to, the curriculum's there, you download Packet Tracer. But you said something very interesting about networking with people, and that's something, you know, Russ White was saying same thing about, you know, connecting with people, LinkedIn. You know, I'm getting, you know, LinkedIn isn't the most popular social media tool on.
right, right, not anymore. I mean, it
But
was
I mean, it
never
is in
its
our
purpose.
in our profession, but not for, you know, the students necessarily. But
Right.
how about, you know, what about, you know, trying to find that internship or first job, even maybe going to a school or a church or nonprofit and saying, hey, you know, I can, you know, would like to help out, would like to get involved. Do you need something? What do you think about, you know, even something like that could get your foot in the door?
Yes, yes, definitely. Go to meetups, right? People are starting to go to meetups again. By the way, we had the pandemic and COVID and everything was, you know, shut down, but now they're already picking back up. So go on meetups.com, see what meetups they have, because all these companies, we're gonna have a meetup actually with getting back into it on March 21st on the Cisco campus, Building 11, right? It's just techie people in the Bay Area, we're gathering there, and we're having a couple of presenters. There's a person from Apple coming and showing what they're working on, some cool technology. So we go there, we meet, we talk. Hey, is there a job for you? Or in some of these meetups, actually recruiters come there, and at the end of the meetup, it's like, hey, we're looking for this, and that. Anyone here interested? Right? So it could be just as easy as just going to meetups, looking on job boards, right? But MetaCAD, Networking Academy, see there, right? Is there an internship at Cisco that I could do in the summer for 2-3 months? Is there a team within Cisco that and you folks are here, right? You're like in the Bay Area. You're like right here where everything is happening. So just take advantage of that. Walk up to these places. People, like 99% of the people in the world, they can't do that because they're not physically here. Right? So you're here.
Even in Santa Cruz here, in this area here, we're still
even Santa Cruz, yeah. I mean, it's not that far. It's not that far, right? It's right next door.
Well, in some ways it is, that we think of ourselves sometimes as far away, but really physically we're close. And I know many of the students are from San Jose, so in the Bay
There
Area.
you go. So, I mean, here is where it's happening, right? Go to these meetups. That's what I found also useful. And they're coming back on, so that's good.
What kind of things would you suggest for students when they're connecting with people? And I think these ideas of meetups or what we're doing here, just connecting with, LinkedIn, connect with people. They'll start, they start seeing your name on things when you're commenting and liking, and it's, even that helps. But so as they're connecting with people and looking to build a resume or portfolio, what kind of skills and qualities are employers looking for? Somebody right out of getting their certification or certificate, associate, bachelor's degree, whatever it might be, but really not any real experience.
So, I mean, it used to be, right, Cisco networking, Microsoft with like system administration. It used to be like Red Hat also system administration on the Linux side. And then now with all the cloud providers, you got AWS, you get Azure, you get GCP, right? So you get, and all of them have their own training and certification programs, right? So where,
well, how can a student that doesn't have all that, they're taking courses, they've got taken, some Cisco, maybe Linux and Python, how can they impress an employer? What are employers looking for? Maybe some of the soft skills side of things, or, I always mention motivation, enthusiasm, that sort of thing.
Yeah. So as you get started, I think attitude is going to be the most important thing because it's not going to have too much experience. But the thing is how you present yourself and how you talk with people and how eager you are to learn. And right, it's like, hey, I know I don't know many things, but I'm eager to learn. So that passion, you can see it in a person, right? As you talk with them for 5-10 minutes, you can pretty much detect it. So that's going to be critically important for you, right? To just be interested, right? Just be interested in it, want to learn more, and show that, hey, I have a bit of skill, right? This is what I've done. And GitHub is going to be, I mean, it's fairly common for people to have, if you have a bit of code, or if you build something, or if you have, text,
Or
you've
even the
written
portfolio
something.
of the labs that we're doing in.
Right. So like kind of like your
doing.
portfolio, and you can just point them here. This is my github.com. This is my account. This is where I'm doing the work that I'm doing, and people can look at it. And that's, these days, that kind of also is part of your resume, right? So if you work on something, work on a project at school, at the college. You have a project. Hey, I had to build a socket server, right? in C++, or whatever it is. Have it there, have it in GitHub, and be organized with this, by the way. As you start building more projects and you start getting more experience, it's nice and good to have like a central point where you gather all these things and you can just point people, hey, have a look, this is my GitHub, this is the projects I've done in school, right?
And
I've
would you
written,
include your, like, I'm having students in some of my classes build a, using campus network architecture, a enterprise network from access distribution core with all the related protocols. Is that something
yeah,
you suggest that they have in their portfolio?
yeah, I mean, if you have that, it's even better because you have an architecture view of things, right? So that kind of moves you from, hands-on troubleshooting, building things to, oh, I architected this. So I know how these things connect to each other. I know how, all these building blocks come together. So
Kind of coming full circle to what you said before, it's a lot of complicated or a lot of sophisticated, let's say, protocols, all trying to get them to work together in this one larger network architecture.
Right. Yeah.
So, I just kind of wrapping things up here a little bit. By the way, I want to also mention passion, that really showing a passion, an interest when you're meeting with people really helps. I always say,
Oh, yeah.
Show that people like to be asked questions, ask them questions. Professionals like to be asked to show you how much they know, and show an interest. Don't be afraid to smile, to show that you're interested, that you've got your enthusiasm. But
And people are nice, by the way. I mean, people are nice. In 20 some years, right, of
yeah,
I've very, very rarely, it was like 1-2 cases, right, of people was like, they were a bit different, but most people, I can tell you, they're very nice people and they want to help you. And like Rick was saying, don't be afraid to reach out. You must have seen also with Russ. I mean, Russ is a exceptional guy also. But they're almost all of them are nice people. So don't be afraid to reach out, ask questions. And most of people will be more than happy to help you out because we know we've been there, right? We've all been there.
That was Russ. Talk about Russ White, the previous speaker we had last week. Yes, thank you.
A bit about DevNet. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
so that's my job for the past 10 years.
So I'm sorry. So you have a job.
I have a job now,
Can you
yes.
tell us a little bit about DevNet, what it is, what you do? Thank you.
Right. So back then, right, we were stacking and racking devices in closets in Bulgaria. I came a long way since then. And pretty much all my career was Cisco related, one form or another, right? So whatever company I was working for, even if it was not Cisco actually until recently, well, 10 years recently. But all the years before, right, was something Cisco related, right? Testing with ILIESIU or a managed service provider in Canada or whatnot. But DevNet, yeah, so I had the luck of joining DevNet 2014 when I was kind of getting started. Rebrand because Cisco had a developer program before DevNet. And then in 2014, it's like, okay, we need to, kind of start from scratch. So they had brought in a new VP, so they were starting to build pretty much a new team. So I was lucky enough to come on back then in 2014, join the team, and I joined the team kind of like a data center person. They brought me in as a contractor to build a data center for them, right? Pretty much from scratch, like, hey, we want to have this sandbox environment, and which turned out to be the sandbox that you actually use now. If you go develop with cisco.com/sandbox,
Can I just mention, so there's a data center within Cisco DevNet that you can, and I'll share this link in the YouTube, but you can create a DevNet account, and there's labs and equipment that you can have access to
for free,
kind of for free, to do this DevNet stuff. And can you mention a little, say what DevNet is? What What
All
is that?
right. So DevNet, yeah, is the developer program from Cisco. Right? It's a nice play on words with developer and network. So it's like DevNet. I take the first three letters, but it's the developer program from Cisco. So as Cisco is opening up and having APIs now on everything, which is, I don't know, Rick, if you told them about APIs yet, but it's application programmable interface. So these are just, ways of interacting with software. It's just, you have a piece of software that exposes an interface that you can interact with, right? And what I mean by interacting with for network devices infrastructure is like you configure, right, that infrastructure, you get metrics out of it to see if it works well, if it doesn't, if there's any issues, right? So it's like management, but also monitoring.
So an API was just like using on your phone, accessing, buying airline tickets through Expedia or something. You're using an API to get information from various airlines about flights and that. Is that fair to say?
It is. It's fair to say, yes. Or, you have a web browser, you go on internet, right? You type in google.com or whatever it is, cisco.com. Well, it's a kind of like an API call over HTTP. So it just gets information and it shows you in a web page format, right? HTML or CSS, whatever it is.
So the DevNet, would you say can you talk how it involves like network automation, programmability?
Yes, yeah. So that's the big thing, right, with these APIs, because these infrastructures are growing to sizes, very, very large, thousands, tens of thousands of devices. But the network administrators, they are not getting, so it's not exponentially growing the number of employees to the number of devices that they have to support and configure, right? So there's clearly a problem there because we have 3 people and they have to maintain, an infrastructure of, 10,000 devices. Well, you can't go device by device and configure this when something happens, right? You kind of have to build some type of automation so that you can scale to this large scale. So that's where the APIs come into the picture. That's where DevNet comes in the picture, because we have built content and we go to events and we teach people on how to embrace automation, programmability, and show them, code. We show them Ansible playbooks or Terraform plans or whatever types of automation tools they're using on how to more easily get on the automation bandwagon and, kind of make their lives easier at the end of the day, because the whole point is a business perspective, right? We cannot hire tens of thousands of people to manage tens of thousands, millions of devices. So we kind of, have to make it more business friendly. Cannot have, it would be nice, but it's not possible.
There's a Cisco certification, the DevNet.
There's the certification that comes with it. Yes, that gives
you
skills.
Are there any books people can buy to help them with this certification?
Wow, that's
like a certification guidebook that you may recommend.
Well, like a shameless plug here, but yes, I was one of the co-authors for the DevNet Associate official certification guide. So if you go on Amazon or Cisco Press or whatever, if you just search for DevNet Associate, third guide, you'll see over there we have a book that we wrote. Actually, we're coming out with a second edition. We're talking about coming out with a second edition and just refreshing some of the content because it's been out there for like 3 years now. So, we need to spruce it up, bring in some new stuff and remove some of the stuff that's been gone and pruned and fell off the radar. So we're coming out with the second edition for that book. Be on the lookout for that. But yeah, that's, we have content, books, certification. There's courses for the certification also to get you started on, if you're new to Python. Most of you probably are not, because if you've done computer science these days, I mean, you must have touched Python one way or another. But that's where it gives you a Python angle from an infrastructure automation, right? So it's like, okay, what libraries are out there in Python to connect to a device, right? And run commands and extract data from it. So it's kind of like Python, but with, an angle on infrastructure. And then all these automation tools that are out there, like Ansible from Red Hat now, and Terraform from HashiCorp, right? So all these other automation tools that are kind of like extracting and making it easier for you on how to manage all this
So Cisco
infrastructure.
Networking Academy does have a course on it, and
They do
yeah, so
have on that associate.
so you know, and I'll include some links on all this stuff. Just to kind of wrap things up, how can students get a hold of you? Keep up with
Oh,
stuff?
yes, I mean, I'm on LinkedIn. You can search my name, you'll find me there. That's mostly the one I'm using lately. I used to be on Twitter, X. I'm not that active anymore. I still keep an eye on it, but I'm not that active. So we'll see what happens with X, Twitter.
And you do
I don't know.
podcasts or
I
video
do.
on with DevNet.
I do, yes. So you can find me on the Cisco DevNet YouTube channel, on the Cisco DevNet LinkedIn account. So I do live streams on Wednesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific.
They're all
On,
recorded and on LinkedIn. So
they're all recording. We have live stream, but I also record them. So it's called Simplifying Network Automation with Matt Grew. I'm Matt Grew, clearly. So yes,
okay,
that's the way to find me, basically.
and I know where
Mostly
you
LinkedIn.
live. So if you're
And Rick knows where I live. Yeah, we're neighbors.
well, Adrian, I want to thank you, my friend. Really
Thank you for having me.
Thank everybody. Yeah, I'm looking, I'm sure we're gonna have you back here. So
Would love to. Yeah, I mean, we kind of derailed. I think you had more questions, but
yeah,
in 1 hour, it's tough to cover everything. We'd love to come back.
yeah. Well, thank you so much, and I'm sure I'll be seeing you soon, one way or the other.
Thanks,
All right.
folks.
Thank you so much, Adrian. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.